Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins, and today I'm here with Matt Presti, who I had the immense pleasure of meeting in person, having a very poignant, actually life-changing discussion with you around the pool in the morning, one of the first mornings that we were there. And Matt, you put a little piece, gave me a word for something I hadn't articulated yet in my own thing, and it was just like eureka for me. So I very much enjoyed meeting you. Welcome to the stream. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thank you, Beth. I appreciate the invitation. It was great to meet you and so many other people. Wonderful bit of networking we all did. And I'm seeing that a lot of us are cross-connecting, cross-pollinating ideas, going on each other's podcasts. And this is a wonderful opportunity. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. So I've got Rockfin going now. If anybody would like to jump over there, you are most welcome to do it. It's here in the chat. We're also live on Rumble. Let me see if I can grab a link for that as well. That's always a little bit more. Oh, there we go. Hear me double, and I'll get a Rumble link. We should be able to see the chat both from Rumble, and there's Matt's URL there, mattpresti.com. You can click right on that. And hello, Arme. Salutations to you as well. Do come say hi in the chat. And if you have questions for Matt, then I have 100. I'll just let you know that we can't promise, but if there's good questions coming through, I'm happy to put them up and ask Matt. And if you're not familiar with Matt Presti, I imagine you are, but if you're not, then I'm going to just let you know a little bit about him. And so he calls himself a metascientist. I'll probably have to ask you to define that in a minute. A musician. You've got a fantastic collection of music. I've been listening to that on you've got a playlist set up on your YouTube. Mm-hmm. Some really good music, very inspired. I'm a total music snob, by the way. I really am super picky about what I let into my, because it gets stuck in there like worms. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons that I took to writing music myself, so I would at least have my own helpful things in my head. But totally love what you're doing over there. Consider yourself a patriot as well, philosopher, poet, practitioner of universal law, not the law of attraction, I'm assuming, which I'm going to ask you about. Yeah, exactly. Natural science, living philosophy, audio and video producer, broadcaster, and host of the Exploration of Consciousness TEC. That is, you're going to find the full episodes over on Rumble. He's a former director of operations and president of the University of Science and Philosophy, formerly known as the Walter Russel Foundation. That's Crow 777 had you on a while back when you were there at the foundation, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And he's currently the CEO of Universal Power, LLC, a volunteer firefighter at Montauk Rural Fire Department. Actually, we just had a great conversation with a bunch of firefighters here in the city, and I asked some behind-the-scenes questions and found out what it's like to be a volunteer firefighter, which they are not, because in the city it's a different thing.
Right.
Yeah. So I just have a lot of admiration for the willingness to go into a flaming building and rescue people and what that must require. So you're a well-rounded person, Matt.
Yeah, I'm just getting started.
There you go. Yeah, real creative superpower. And I know that's part of the subject that you are that we're going to talk about today. And so we're talking about, I pulled this from one of I think you were actually talking to Steve
Falconer.
That I just interviewed. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you said the phrase folding and unfolding to describe the nature of reality. So that's going to be where we're headed to talk about this. I know you and I connected around my work on ascension myth busting, which was my talk at Anarchapulco. And it's so funny because I work inside my own bubble quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And then I think, oh, nobody's going to like this. They're all going to think, because they love their ascension. But I had so much support from people. And you were one of the first ones to say, like, yeah, great topic. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's cool. Good to know. And so why do you want to start there?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So what's wrong with ascension philosophies and practices and goals?
Well, you commented on my Dispelling Dimensional Madness documentary, and that is basically saying the same thing, that what are you ascending to? Now, there's obviously, I'll give credit to people who want to use the word ascension. I just had Jonathan Mosenter on my show, and he likes the word. He also likes the word dimension, but he defines them both differently. Ascension is more of growing out of your limitations. You're ascending upward like a plant does toward the sunlight. That's certainly one aspect. And then dimensions being variables, which it's interesting with the English language, the language itself, one word could have 6 meanings. So if you're talking ascension, like I'm growing here in this world and I'm ascending out of my poverty toward the riches of living a life that's purposeful, you're excused in my classroom. So, but if you're of the mindset that I'm going to enter a different dimension and leave reality, or I'm going to ascend to the 5th dimension or to the 9th stargate where we can get behind the Hale-Bopp comet, if we drink this poison Kool-Aid, then obviously you don't pass the class, in my opinion. And so Dispelling Dimensional Madness was made to call out this fallacy of higher dimensions, which, to me, what's funny about all that in this ascension, New Age movement, ascension idea, that we can just ascend out of the reality that we're in, it's what's also known as toxic escapism. And it's not to say that escapism isn't good. Lori and I, when we want to escape, we'll put on a series or something, especially in the winter when things are slow and you're supposed to hibernate and relax and chill. But when it's time to work, it's time to get to work. But what's funny about this ascension idea, or the higher dimensional idea, that the 5D, and you can just do a YouTube search on 5D reality and you'll find 1,000 people talking about ascending to a higher dimension. What all these folks have in common is that they're all telling you from this one reality about these other dimensions. So it's like, well, if you're in this other dimension, why are you still here in my reality or this reality? Shouldn't you be somewhere else where I can't even hear you talk? So the whole idea of it's sort of ludicrous. Just the point of my Dispelling Dimensional Madness, I'll just say DDM, is bringing people back to this one reality in which we find ourselves. All dimension is here. That's the point of it. We don't need to ascend, or we don't need to disappear or find some other mental plane of existence. This is where the fun happens, but also this is where the most evil, and it's a free will universe, which tells me, I'll be doing a documentary in the year to come. I threatened DDM for a long time, but this is one I've been threatening for about 2 years now, which is going to be entitled Free Will and Evil. And really, without free will, there would be no evil. So again, healthy escapism is good. Getting out of the city, vacating it, going on vacation, taking a walk in the woods is escaping, the humdrum of the house, or the job, taking a break, just in other words, putting yourself in a different location for a minute so that you can soak up some new thoughts, new things like that. But then the toxic escapism, again, is the New Age promise. The ascended masters, we can just, go float on a cloud with interdimensional entities, or get on a UFO and leave the earth and save ourselves that way. It's sort of the get out of jail free card. But I don't, there's 2 ways you can look at the earth. You can look at it as a prison, or you could look at it as an earth school, which is what I try to do for myself. And if you're really here, you're here to graduate, and you're here to get your diploma and move forward in your life as best you can with all the faculties, strengths, the purpose that you can muster to create heaven on earth, which is, a mindset, really. And it all happens right here, and it all happens right now.
That's beautiful. I love all of that. And there's a lot to unpack in there. See where to begin. Just when you're talking about how, and is it not one of the hallmarks of Gnosticism that we're in a jail planet, we're on prison planet, and we've got all these archons working against us, and even death is a trap, right? Like, don't go into the light. We're hearing
Sure.
all the last few years. And so this is I like the classroom. If it's a metaphor, if we need a metaphor, that's, I think, much closer to what we're dealing with here. And then that relationship to free will is like that's going to be such a juicy project, the free will and the evil. I'm glad you're threatening to do that. That's so good. And then the escapism is so childlike, right? It doesn't make sense, even that basic logic, like, well, if you're in the fifth dimension, why can I hear you here in the third
Right.
dimension? And we've been given every reason possible to want to escape our realities, right? So much pain, and more pain. And, it takes, what do you think it takes, if I frame it as a question, what does it take to remain in where we are, which it's sort of stupid even to phrase it that way, because we kind of can't get out of where we are. Even death, that's what facing my death made me see, that death was no escape either. So where, anything you want to say about all of that?
Well, it's your story is a brave one, because you had to face some things, and I'm glad you shared a bit about that with me. I had a near-death experience myself, that, we all face mortality. And that's one of the driving forces for the cosmetic industry, or the anti-aging industry. It's a literal industry to the tune of billions of dollars per year. But what's funny is it doesn't alleviate the pressure or the fears of death. But one thing that does is, and you touched on folding and unfolding, is, for me, when I discovered the work of Walter and Lael Russell, especially her book, Why You Cannot Die, was a life changer. They stress the importance of lining your worldview not so much up to academia and what the materialists try to tell us, but what does nature really tell us? How does a flower unfold? And it does unfold, right? It unfolds from a bud. And what is the flower? What is the stem of the flower and the roots? What do those unfold from? The seed, right? And so do we. We unfold from a thing called an egg and a sperm. That's the electrical first division, where that creative power, or that chi, or that primal energy, or the prana, or the sex urge, or the ode of Karl von Reichenbach, or the orgone of a Wilhelm Reich. These are the primal energy references that are all the same energy that causes, it's the electrical cause of division of a seed, which unfolds into its bodied form according to its pattern. And we as human beings have a pattern. It's called the human body. And when we unfold into that pattern, it gives us the form that we recognize through our senses as being a human being. And we would also recognize a rose because it unfolds according to its pattern. But in that unfolding, we also refold our own seeds. Men unfold sperm, or refold sperm, and women refold eggs. And then that creates sets up the cycle for repetition, which is what the Russells bode us to pay attention to. Pay attention to the repetitions and the repetitiousness of nature itself. Our very own human nature is seed-like, and we unfold, and then we refold within us seeds, as an oak tree refolds acorns, and then the pollination occurs, which is the electrical interchange of the male and female of the universe, and then it produces an offspring, which springs forward into another state of unfolding and refolding. And so at death, we encounter what's called a refolding process. And what we're basically doing is our bodies are refolding back into the space from which they emerged. And that's why we often, at near-death experiences, and I'm explaining this through a very Russell interpretation, but the reason I like it is because as a model, it works so well. It does help to alleviate the fear of death when you understand that this is just an incarnation. It's similar to some of the mystical and religious modalities that have come before it, and yet every message has its time and its purpose. And it's really, to me, an understanding of how nature works and how there really isn't a thing called death. It's more, if you were to think of it in terms of nature, it would be a refolding. back into the stillness and back into the silence from which we all sprang. Just like sound refolds back into silence and motion refolds back into stillness. I mean, we become still at night when we rest, and we refold in our rest in order to recharge our bodies so we can unfold through action in the next day. And it's a two-way motion universe, which is the beauty of it, unlike the one-way entropic universe, which is Catholic in its origin. I could get more into that, but I think that sort of puts it forth as you asked for the comment.
Exactly. The repetitions and the patterns, that's I call myself a pattern hunter.
There you go.
And for the most part, people have seen their patterns, and maybe more at the level of their behavior, the way that their life shows up, and it seems like an enemy to them. But I started seeing how, okay, that's not working out for you. And when I was dying person, that pattern didn't seem like a good one at all. But once you discovered the pattern, you've actually discovered the life behind the pattern. And it shows up either in its natural state or the inversion of the natural state, which is like that, the death experience that you're describing. And I love that conclusion, that like that's really what happens every time I myself or a client goes through the fear of dying and the feeling of dying, because it feels like you're dying when you're fearing dying. And then you bust through and you go like, oh, wow, it wasn't even what I thought it was. It wasn't even a thing. It's not there anymore. You can't hold it. You can't refer back to it. The illusion is gone of it. And there's so much power in that, because I see how we are controllable on that fear alone. There's several in the basket that they can throw at us, but that's the big one. As long as you think that you're not going to survive it, then you'll do whatever the controller says.
Yeah. So, if anybody needs any proof, COVID 2020, the last 4 years, I think the whole thing was powered by the fear of death. And they really, as psychological controllers, have us by the cojones, if you will, to borrow a statement from somebody. But yeah, it's really the driving factor of everything that this that we talk of uses, is the Machiavelli one-way street of control, which is otherwise known as fear, or putting forth false evidence to appear real. It's until we get our own set of courages to face our fears head on. What are these patterns that they keep using against humanity, which is fear-based, trauma-based mind control for the most part? And many have come along and said it, the Ikes and the Bill Coopers and others, for going back decades. They've known that, there's been a psychological manipulation and control mechanism to basically force humans to do the unthinkable, to do things they would otherwise go, that's ridiculous. I would never do that. And if you'd have asked people in 2019, would you put a mask on and stand 6 feet behind the person in front of you at the grocery store, they would have laughed you out of the room. And just, but look at what happened. I mean, so I really think their underlying mechanism and what powers all of this is the fear mechanism. And they've had decades to study it, if not centuries, if not millennia, because that's what, again, Machiavelli points out, that the nature of the universe, as the Russells would say, is reciprocal. It's based on love. And what did Machiavelli say to the rulers and the prince? He said, well, if reciprocal rule doesn't work, then resort to the one thing that will: fear. That way you just scare the hell out of your subjects and they'll fall right into place and you can keep your power, And it's interesting to me that Hillary Clinton and who was the prime minister during the Iraq war in the UK, Tony Blair, sleep with copies of The Prince on their bedside, because they exactly follow that doctrine. And then they develop a psychology of fear as their weapon, using their media to deliver it to the masses. So when you recognize that pattern, as you said, pattern recognition, be a pattern hunter, be a pattern, put the fear patterns on your wall like trophies. I conquered this, I conquered this one, I conquered that one. You know, I swore to myself after 9/11 I'd never fall for another one of their fear patterns again. And to this day, I'm free of it, because I said I'm going to notice that when they start suggesting the absurd and what is unreasonable to my soul, I shall reject it. And it works. It's called the spiritual armor of the Creator, or you put on the light, and the light does not allow the darkness to enter its field.
I love that. That's amazing. I have to go back to a thought also about the folding and the unfolding. Maybe that'll weave throughout the conversation here, is about how, when the flower, we say, dies, like, oh, the
Mhm.
flower's dying. Well, what's it actually doing? Making seeds. It's folding its life energy into a very highly concentrated, or maybe decentrated, I just learned that word from you recently,
Mhm.
version of itself, very much alive. When I had cilantro growing in the garden, and I'm like, oh, so sad, my cilantro went to seed, and then I eat the seed, and I went like, no, there it is. There's the life force of the plant. It hasn't gone anywhere. And even in the context of ascension, how, there does come a time where that plant, if it's got cause to just keep going up and up and up, and then it's just right, something's going to happen in that process, and then it just gives more credence to the folding and the unfolding nature of life. So in that, having said all of that, what do you see as the goal of life?
Well, to manifest the Creator, which is the idea behind it all. Idea, really, the reason they say it's bulletproof is because it doesn't exist in the physical world. It's what exists are the representative bodies of idea. So when you look at the Mona Lisa, you're not going to find Leonardo da Vinci anywhere in it. You can analyze the paint drops under an electron microscope, and you won't find Leonardo in that paint drop. But you can know that Leonardo painted it. And one of the things that the Russells said over and over, especially Walter in his message of the Divine Iliad, he said the painter is not the painting, the poem is not the poet, the musician is not the composition, and so on and so forth. But so what are these things? They're representative bodies of the minds that have been frozen into form. So the pyramids are a frozen thought form of the creator of that pyramid. Who that was, we have no idea. But they must have been pretty magnificent to be placed at a position like it was, and be so timeless in their existent pattern. But what we can know about idea is that it's bulletproof, it exists, and that's what you're unfolding from, is the idea of the pattern of humanity is a pattern of idea that unfolds into a physical universe and then refolds back into the universe of stillness and silence from which it sprang. Much like when you pluck a guitar or strum a chord on a guitar, it rings, it lasts for a series of repetitions of frequency and vibration, but that frequency and vibration, which came from the stillness, ultimately returns to the stillness. So the idea of something is immortal and timeless, like the notes of a symphony, which are what the composers pick up on, and they create notes on a piece of paper, and then they take that two-dimensional piece of paper and turn it into 3 dimensions when they have an orchestra play it, as a symphonic representative piece of their own frozen thought. And the composer then directs the orchestra, and behold, that what was otherwise silence in the mind of the composer becomes audible to those in the audience. And the same inspiration that created that composition can be passed to the souls of the people listening to it. And it refolds through the ears into the mind to be heard by the mind itself, which has no vibratory features, which that in itself right there is a realization. Unpack that, guys. That'll really blow your mind to realize that what you're actually hearing is silence. What you're actually seeing is stillness, but it's just the way it unfolds and refolds using the, from mind to physicality back to mind. That's the order of creation.
Interesting. So many things in there. So frequency and vibration is something that I have both rejected and embraced in ways that it's not as common. And discovering, now this is from the work of Lester Levinson and also David Hawkins. I'm sure you're very familiar with the scale of emotion. And
not so much, but okay. Please share.
So they both found it so similar that they are practically identical. You can definitely see how either they talk to each other, one stole from the other, or they simultaneously had the same revelation. And so our internal emotional life, that's my subject, not exclusively, because nothing is separate inside. You can't really break something apart. But there are, say, what spiritual New Age people would call low frequency states: apathy, grief, fear. And then you get higher up the scale into lust, anger, and pride. And you go even higher in frequency to courage, acceptance, and peace. But these are all distinct frequencies. So for the most part, people are chasing peace. They think peace is the goal. And they end up chasing this high frequency. And that's what and I was on that track as well, realizing that ultimately what happens when you chase the high frequency, you also are either unearthing, exposing, or creating all of the low frequencies at the same time. As above, so below. So you're not really getting up where you think you are. You're creating more trouble for yourself. And you're also creating the tendency to suppress way more, because it doesn't match your self-image of being such a high frequency person. And so in the last couple of years, really studying that and seeing how the goal is not to go up, it's not to go down either, but to get actually off the map, back to something, now we kind of lack for words, back to freedom, back to, that which you named for me has no frequency, has no vibration. And so now it's compounded because I talked to your friend Mark Archer, who's going to be coming on.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. I really loved that
cool.
interview. Yeah. We had a good talk. He's going to be coming on the 28th to do an interview with me as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So he added a little chunk in that I had been through Christian phase, and he talks about it like this realm is Lucifer's creation. Are you down with that? Do you think like that at all?
Oh, if I felt like that, I'd never leave the house.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's
I'd lock myself in my room and never come out if that was the case. But,
okay. Yeah. So that's okay. We won't go there. But so where do you think that, like, is there any intersection of the vibratory world and the world of the stillness of no vibration?
That's a great question. Again, I think the mind is sort of the way I look at it is, and I was forced to come to this conclusion after just months of sitting in silence and really going over in my mind, what is Walter Russel really telling me here about the universe of mind as a cause and the motion universe as an effect, a polarized effect, which is otherwise known as duality. What does Walter say about it, and how does that relate to my life? And as a musician, I could instantly see that, yes, there's silence between the notes. And as Beethoven said, that's where you find God, is in the silence between the notes. Walter said God is in the fulcrum. Imagine the seesaw, which moves. What doesn't move? The fulcrum. So inside of the center of us is a fulcrum that divides into two hemispheres and is mirrored back upon itself, which creates what we call left and right, up and down, front, back, which are cubic, by the way, six-sided. Every object we see, even spheres, can basically be thought of as existing within a cubic structure. Thus we have 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, our MP3s. I could go on and on, storage devices, the computing speed, RAM, it's all based on cubic, which is interesting. It's a sign right there that, nature itself, if you look at the honeycombs of the bees, they're telling you there's 6 sides, the hexagonal structures of crystal cleavage and other things, crystals and whatnot. Why is this important? Because to achieve a body, there must be a cause. To achieve a division, a polarity, a polarized condition, a frequency whatsoever, or a vibration requires a cause. And materialist science will tell you that the cause is in motion, yet they can't find it. They've tried to find the human mind in neuroscience for decades, and they still can't find what's thinking. They can't find it. They've looked at all the parts of the brain, and they can only say that sometimes the brain thinks here, and sometimes it thinks over here. When it's remembering, it thinks here. When it's processing, it thinks here. But they can't find what the hell is thinking. And I don't think they ever will. But Bruce Lipton and Rupert Sheldrake are 2 prominent guys that I just love their work, because the morphinogenic field and Lipton's idea of, this intelligence that's not in the matter itself, but is a field that contains the matter. So that lines right up with what the Russell said, that the mind thinks through the brain. The mind is not the brain, but rather thinks through it. And if you invert a galaxy and turn the space white, which is normally black to our senses, that shows the location of the creator of that field of mind. And so mind really is, as Russell said, stillness, silence. It's the equilibrium. We can't hear what anybody's thinking, right? But they're thinking nonetheless. So where is it quantitatively? And that's why science has locked itself into a prison of the senses. Because how can a scientist define love? Can he prove that love exists in a laboratory? They all use the word, bye honey, love you, I'm going to Monsanto to work on, splicing shit together that I should otherwise leave alone. But I love you, I'll see you when I get home. They all use the word, but none of them can weigh it on a scale. None of them can tell you what color it is, where it lies, where, they say the heart, maybe. Nobody really knows. But we can all agree that this thing called love exists, and if you're fortunate enough to experience it through whatever ways or means you can come about it, a loving friend, a loving partner, a loving relationship, a loving something you love to do, so we know that that word exists, but there's no quantifiable proof that it exists at all. So what do we really know about it? We can know things that don't have quantitative, they're called qualities, and that's the thing to remember, that science, for all its glory, it pats itself on the back to its own detriment. It's become hubristic. Just trust the science, follow the science. How many people have heard that and are nauseated by it anymore? Mm-hmm. The Neil deGrasse Tysons, the Michio Kakus, and all the rest of them think they have this wonderful thing that answers everything, but it actually makes more questions than answers. And so if you incorporate the mind into it as a cause, that's where you really begin to understand the polarized nature of reality and why it polarizes. Because in order to exist, in order for mind, for an idea to come into being, it has to be divided into a motion universe. And so the motion is borning and dying all at the same time. Life and death are, again, another opposite, another polarity, if you will. And all things in nature are dually charged, doubly charged, and 2 hemispheres. So that tells me right there that, like magnets, everything has a north and a south pole. There's no monopoles in nature. If you were in a monopole condition, nothing would exist. It would be all mind, holy mind. And so I think, long answer short, the mind is, as a cause, is one. It's undivided. It has no frequency, no vibration. And I would just borrow again from the Russells, who said there are no vibrations whatsoever to the spirit, but the spirit can think, the mind is the spirit, can think through a polarized body, and that's what fills it with life. And when that leaves the body, we call that death. So,
Wow.
short, long answer.
That's a lot. Yeah. Amazing. That's beautiful. Yeah, duality and polarity. I automatically think about, there's a million of them, but I think of the masculine, feminine,
Mhm.
that also the gender is inherent across nature as a universal law.
Correct.
And as two archetypes, I always will say they're actually not two archetypes. They are just like a magnet that can't be one pole. It's only a magnet because of having two poles. And then is it correct to say that this is something I want to check with you also, because I think I heard you say that magnetism has no vibration. Is that accurate?
From a Russell perspective, magnetism is the stillness. It's referred to as the still magnetic light in Walter's science. And what he found was that
God as we
gravitate.
know it, right? Is that
Yeah, you could say that.
yeah?
What's interesting with Russell's work is we had to decode it. My former co-producer and I, we produced the Secret of Light series, which was 19 units. And we had to go in and really pick the work apart, and because they had never defined a lot of the words that they use, like the word light, for instance, is different than what you'd read in a science dictionary, or the word gravity. To the Russells, gravity was stillness, but to science, gravity is an inward pulling force. So there's reasons to upgrade definitions of things. As we all know, there's there's misuse of terminology, but there's also correct use of terminology. And words like plants can grow in their meanings. And as culture grows and society grows, you add definitions to things. So the word gravity itself, from a Russell standpoint, his science explained gravity as stillness, and that it divides into shafts that create the motion that spins around it. So if you want to find God, which is gravity, capital G, look for what moves around it. The door jamb, the door opens and closes, but the jamb does not move. Therefore, that's the location of the creator, the power source. Again, the seesaw, the fulcrum of the seesaw doesn't move. The shaft of a turning wheel doesn't move. It spins on that shaft that's still mounted to the frame of the vehicle. But we look at, our science looks at what moves and said that's where the power source is. But all motion is 90 degrees to its source of power, including us. Here's my motion of my arms, but yet what doesn't move is the dead center of me. And the same with all of us. We have this demarcation line that cuts our body right in half, the septum of our nose, the line in your teeth, keep going down, right? Your belly button, so on and so forth. You could cut yourself perfectly in half and you're a mirror image. So one thing I like to do, if I could, is just show your audience a quick presentation of the mirror cube, which is a thing that Walter Russell asked to be designed at some point. But it's basically otherwise known as the universe in a box. And it's 6 mirrors, and there's, of course, 8 corners in a cube, right? So I'm going to show you guys the cubic wave field model of Walter Russell. There's 7 LEDs in this box. The last corner is cut out, and that's so that you can see. But what you're seeing is a radial universe where there's no curvature. There's no curvature inside this box. So check this out, you guys. Let me see if I can line this up here.
Wow, fancy. That's neat. And that's just mirrors on the side of the inside of the 6 walls.
That's correct.
Right.
And so it spreads out to infinity, and it goes on, and it's curved. It eventually starts to curve, but yet there's no curvature there.
Right.
So really what we're seeing, and that's an optical illusion, and what we're seeing with our very eyeballs, which are spheres, right? And it's one, you could bring this up for consideration for what is the shape of the earth, but really there's no straight lines in nature. So we do live in a radial optic universe, and what appears to be forward motion is actually canceled out immediately and recorded and repeated in reverse. So what appears, and the reason that has to happen is because if the mind didn't perceive a forward flow, we basically wouldn't unfold. There'd be no progression, there'd be no time, there'd be no space. You'd never leave the fulcrum, because the illusion of traveling or moving or taking a step forward would instantly be voided and noticeable by your senses, which means we'd basically render ourselves inert, and there'd be no reason to leave the God mind, if you will, and unfold into a time and space universe of sequential, rhythmic, balanced interchange. So really, I think it's divinely purposeful. And the reason for that, and why you don't want to escape it, because it's where everything happens. This is where life happens. And if you're trying to escape it into this idea of, I just want to get out of the cycle of births and deaths because it's Saturnian, or I don't want to meet the light and then be sent right back here. In Russell science, you tend to, if you live 80 years, you're going to rest for 80 years or so. That's roughly what they put forth as a model. And it's only a model, of course, but when you do unfold again, you pick up from where you left off with the same talents. And if you were heading back toward the darkness of your own jungle, then that could be just as dangerous as well, because, or I should say, that's going to unfold in your future life. So I don't feel necessarily sorry for the things that people do on this planet that are evil, because I'm confident that whether in this life or the next one, they're going to reap the rewards of their own, the fruits of their own labors, which may be rotten. So, but I do know that this universe is a balanced universe. It's a wonder, really, and a mystery, but there is some sense to knowing your purpose in it. And I think that's what we're all here to discover and really make something special of it.
Yeah, to me, that's the ultimate big subject on the table all the time. That you're seeing what are you being called for, and each of us can only individually know that, right? I can't look in your soul. I can see. As a reader, as a pattern reader, I can see signs and breadcrumbs, but it's only the person inside that can know what purpose means in this moment, especially. Back to the masculine and feminine, how do you see those? Again, two would be misnaming it for me. Like, do you agree that they're two sides of the same coin, of that wholeness?
In the mind universe, the Russells refer to the creator as mother, father, creator. They also say that all planets, all stars, the sun itself, the moon are doubly charged. So we don't just live on a Mother Earth, we live on a Mother and Father Earth. The hot red male is encapsulated by the cool blue oceans, if you will, and it contains it, keeps it from exploding. So mother and father are basically, they do unfold from one source, but again, that unfoldment into a polarized condition would also be known as a triality, because between every magnet, if you take a magnet, let's just say you have let me see, I thought I had a magnet around here. You have a bar magnet, right?
Okay.
On one side is the South Pole, on the other side is the North Pole. There's a block wall between that magnet, and that's actually a line of white light. Or in a ring magnet, it would be a circle of white light. And that white light is the location of the creator. You can actually see it if you use magnetic paper and you hold it over a magnet. You can see the location of the creator. The creator is not only provable in the laboratory, as Russell said, but it can be known by noticing what doesn't move and what isn't divided. It's always at 90 degrees to motion. And that creative power, that chi, that primordial energy, is at the dead center of each one of our bodies. And that's why the Christ said the kingdom of heaven is within. Yet people get so fixated. We're in a very materialist age, especially for our own awareness. It's become very externalized. And I think that could be due to cycles of time or the yugas or whatever you want to, lay as a factor or causal agent to why we're in this age of iron where we're very matter oriented. But it's the great teachings of spiritual masters, mystics, and philosophers, poets, saints, great scientists who also understand that the universe is two-way. That mind is as much an import to understanding the universe as the physicality itself. So to be too much in the body, you're missing the glory of the mind. And to be too much in the mind, you're missing the glory of the body. And that's where alchemy and the great transmutive realization of turning lead into gold, which is neither be just mind and neither be just body, but be both in balance with one another, which is, again, the balance of male and female. We are half male and half female and only different by one chromosome, right? If I'd have got the one less chromosome, I'd have a higher pitched voice and much better looking legs, but I'm not going to try to be something I'm not, because I'm content with my purposefulness, even at the body level. I'm good with it, and I'm going to make the most of it and try to develop and create the most purposeful life that I can.
Nice. Yeah. And it's an area that's taken so much damage in our world, and especially lately, that they're trying to, make children think that they're a boy when they're a girl, or vice versa, and going right to the extremes of surgeries and chemical transformations, and what they're doing, sending in the children's schools and the libraries, what they're receiving at home right now. It is beyond. I'm so grateful every day that my son is 17 and is way awakened himself. Yeah. And it really made me reflect on it in my work with this archetype, the masculine feminine, just seeing how much immense power potential is there in those poles, that and that's why people experience such incredible tension and a lot of difficulty in the relationships between men and women, that also have enormous rewards when they're both allowed to be, whether that's in a relationship or inside yourself. I've had incredible healing. The whole King Hero's Journey podcast was born of me healing a lot of the masculine in me that I had externalized and hated and became a feminist over. That whole psyop of the thing. Go ahead.
That's a super important point you just made. One cool little experiment people can do, if you've got any kind of photo editor, is take a photo of your face, right? And you cut it in half, perfectly in half, and then you copy the left side of your face and paste it to the left side. You'll have to flip it around 90 degrees, but paste the two left sides together, and you will look more male. Now do the same with the right, paste the right to the right, and you'll look more female. That's a hugely interesting clue that, when you say one chromosome, it's literally the tiniest thing you can imagine of difference. But yet, to even produce an offspring, the male and the female must unite, copulation, and in that uniting, the offspring, the sperm and the egg converge, the egg divides, and that first division is basically around that light, which then divides into 4, then to 8, and so on. And it's just, again, the cubic nature of the universe, and the two become one, which is really 3. 1 centered by 2 is 3. That's the Holy Trinity, or the Divine Trinity. And that's why I like to say, if you can start to see the world not as just a duality, nor a monad or monoism, but rather a triality, or trialism. That's literally you getting behind the motion universe and commanding it to become divine, to fulfill and crystallize your divine, to freeze your divine thoughts into form. That's what an artist does. That's what creators do. They take their thought and they freeze it into form by building a body to house it. But it's never the actual idea. It's only a simulation of the idea. And the closer you can get to that idea, the more artistic and divine it becomes.
The more satisfying.
It's your spirit literally frozen into form. And the great things that inspire us, the great masters of time immemorial, through the 5 fine arts or any arts, there's so many great arts that we can use to create and freeze our thoughts in different ways. Gardens, gardening, cooking, even, you name it, you can do this. And when you're driving your body, let's just say, when the opposites work for you, as opposed to your mind having to work for the opposites, then you're learning to command matter at that point.
That's beautiful. And then so that trinity there, you're the third party, or mind is the third party. Can you
Well, mind is the center. Mind is the fulcrum, and the fulcrum is 1. So duality is 2. So 2 and 1 is 3. But now if you're operating out here on the seesaw, I'm hungry, I'm cold, I want more beer, I want that drugs, I want to take this, you're not, that's your body driving your mind. Your soul's in the back seat going, what about me? Right? So when your soul, when you bring it forth, when you stand between the tensions of opposites, it's been called, or you are able to turn lead into gold. In other words, stand between the polarizations of your hemispheres of your own brain. That's sort of like you're literally closer to the fulcrum. It's called being in the zone in sports. You almost forget your body. When you're being extremely creative, your body just disappears, and it's just holy mind at that point. And that's when we do some of our most incredible work. One sign that you're on that path is when time disappears, and you're like, man, what happened to the past 6 hours? I just noticed that I haven't eaten or drank anything, and I need to take a break. So that's what I'm talking about. You're in that fulcrum, and your body's literally one with your mind in a sense. And that's when the great magic happens.
Amen. Yeah, I teach a technique called marrying the opposites.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about exactly what you said. Both sitting, noticing, receiving the tension of the opposites, holding both in mind at the same time, which is very difficult to do. So it starts with holding one in mind, holding the other in mind, holding one in mind, feeling the charge, feeling whatever emotionally surrounds it, or spiritually, whatever. And then at some point, could you hold both in mind and just be with that tension? Because that's exactly like, it's it's not comfortable, but it's something to be, do you want to say harvested, received? There's power in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's exactly what you say, that the whole thing dissolves any sense of duality, or there being two sides that compete and oppose each other. I see so much of opposition is actually a mental concept, because masculine, feminine, they do not oppose each other. It's the same way a magnet does not oppose itself, right? It's working together for one whole purpose.
That's correct. And we so often don't notice what is binding them. That the block wall of a magnet is also known as the location of the creator in Russell science. That's the power in that. What you said, the marrying of the opposites, is the basis of alchemy. If you look at any of the alchemical drawings, why is the sun on one side and the moon on the other?
Oh, good.
Why is the man and the woman on opposite sides? What is the north and south of the magnet? But yet in all the alchemy drawings, in the center is this Vesica Pisces with the grail, or the flaming heart, or the sun, this bright, incredible light, or the Vesica, or the child inside of the Vesica Pisces, the savior child. You know, perhaps this is really the meaning of what the savior child is that it's more of an alchemical marriage within ourselves. And interestingly enough, my studies into the mystical and mysticism itself, the mystics, if you will, have described this process as well as a blinding white light, which no eyes can see, meaning our external outward looking eyes. It's the inward eye, or the single eye. Let thine eye be single. And that's what Walter Russel and Leo described as the flash of light of illumination. Scientifically defined is an electric short circuit between the lobes of the brain. It's a literal flash of light, and you pass through the color spectrum into the white light of mind. And the reason it's white is because, well, why is a movie screen white? Because if it was
all the colors of light,
right, if it was any other color, would it reflect the color spectrum? Mm-mm. If it was black, it would absorb it. So, and why is the light bulb over the head? What does that symbolize? An idea. So what is idea but that white light? And that's what's within each of us. And it's such a minute microscopic sliver that, and it's not, you can't quantify it, because it's the ultimate power source. And that's what powers the human body. And when the human body is unable to any longer express that light, it folds back into itself. And that's what we call death. But we fold back into that light and we rest for, again, a period of time until we unfold from it again. And so when I hear people say, don't go into the light, put as much time into studying mysticism as opposed to believing the Illuminati's description of Saturn as some god planet that is in control of all of our destinies. These people couldn't control they couldn't control a bad dream, for God's sakes. And they're making a mess of things, but the more people listen to them, the more de-inspired they get. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's like all the answers are within. They're right here. All knowledge is here. It can be ours for the asking, as Russell said himself. And that's why I admire their teachings. It's the cult-proof nature of the teachings, which says there's no middleman between you and the Creator. Talk to God. Start talking to that mother, father, creator within you, and you will hear the answers come to you. And our knowing, that's our relationship to it, is that it speaks wordlessly in rhythms of light, waves of light. And the heart is the transmitter and the receiver for those waves.
Beautiful. And I just often use the word interlopers and to refer to programming, but we have so many examples of interlopers. We need the priest to talk to God. Mm-hmm. We need the doctor to heal. We need all these professionals, but inside our own self, we've set it up so that we've got distinct vibrations that organize as programs that have no life of their own, but they speak as if they do. They give instructions because you are the one unconsciously imbuing them with life energy. Mm-hmm. And then you've got this go-between, and it's saying you're going to die or something like, ridiculous like that, when you're actually just sitting talking to somebody that you're interested in. And so yeah, that process of going, and it makes me also think very much of conversations with Ben Balderson on, is it Hermes and Mercury, if I'm getting those right, and how, when you've got electricity and the resistance that gets created, which is the power, and then if you don't have that resistance, then all you have is light. And is this relating at all to what you're also talking about?
Yeah, because the body it sets up a resistance. I mean, there's an interesting theory I put forth that spontaneous combustion is actually too much of an illumination. if you will, and that's just too much light. Somebody got too much of a download or too much of a realization of their source, and it crisped them right out of existence. All that's left is a pile of ash. But it's a good idea as to why maybe this thing happens, this weird thing called spontaneous combustion. But with the study on illuminates and their experiences of light, for instance, Paramahansa Yogananda said the experience of God or the mind could be likened to that of 1,000 suns in the mind. Well, what can be that bright? Why do we have ideas that go off? But yeah, without resistance, without a body to resist, the cold through its own layer of skin, they're without resistance to certain toxins in the environment, for instance, or excessive heat or whatnot. We put on layers to resist the cold when we go outside. We take off those layers called clothing when we go to the beach. So yeah, we have to have resistance. It's part of the electrical formula in Ohm's law. And without that, we can't calculate electricity worth a damn. But there's other ways to calculate new concepts about electricity that we have yet to learn. There's a whole nother half of Ohm's law, which hasn't been discovered yet. And that's coming down the pipe. And it's part of the work I do and I think Russell's model is a model, and there's a lot of models out there. I got to give credit to many of these models have helped humanity. Many haven't, but really we're in a battle for models. May the best model win. Right now there's a model war between the shape of the earth. And I'll just say that the spherical or the oblated spherical model, it has its place. It's worked well. Is that the final truth? I don't know. I haven't been to the top of the atmosphere to really say that I've seen with my own eyes 100% concrete proof that, this is the shape. I don't know. But neither has anyone else, so until we get to that point of absolute, and I'm not going to trust NASA. I didn't trust them before this whole, thing happened. I knew about the moon when I read, back in the early 2000s about the evidence against the idea that we went there. So really it comes down to what model works. And until we have a model that replaces existing models, and that's all you can do. You have to put something forward that, like the atomic model of the atom. The atomic atom is a model, but I know that there's no such thing as an atom in the way that they describe it. These hilarious little studded balls, that electrons don't move in irrational orbits like that. They move out at the equators, which is why when you throw a stone into the water, you don't see the water going like this all around the stone. It moves concentrically outward because there's an order to reality. And we've got a lot to learn. I'll just say that. And models, again, may the best model win.
Nice. Well, I was just wondering about if models are interlopers, and then if interloping is something that has both a natural state in, like, as the resistance that allows us not to spontaneously combust, and then the interlopers that cause interference and break up a clear signal.
Would you say interlopers are more of like a mental construct from that perspective?
To me, anything real will exist at every level. So you'll be able to find it inside yourself and examples of it out in the world. Because, say I saw an osteopath today, and he's a kind of interloper for my health, and I should, have all the intelligence here, but he just got me ahead about like 1,000,000 miles in terms of my own biofeedback and knowledge and ability to work with somebody with a lot of experience. So he's a kind of interloper, but it's going to be it's already been extremely positive in the outcome of it. And then you could have another practitioner that would, put all their bad programs in me, or it's not really like that, but they would energize. I don't just let anybody work on me at all, because I know the effect. Then I'll have to go recover from that. And so, yeah, I was just thinking, because we're in a world of inversions. That's like you said, the signature of Satan. I heard you say, and then, but there's always a natural way, because that's the real creation. You can't invert what doesn't already exist in nature. So just
Right.
thinking out loud about interlopers, and how, like, the programs are definitely interlopers. They're a third party that is interfering in the direct expression of the life.
Right. And so from that, I would garner that it could be physical, mental, spiritual, or emotional. All of those, and all of the above, are in some form or another either a positive or negative interloper. So,
Yeah.
does that sound right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just playing with the idea.
Oh man, there's plenty of good and bad interlopers out there on all four of those fronts, and I guess part of our challenge is to find balance. Which ones work, which ones don't. I know that allopathic medicine has a purpose. A lot of people might find that, but my Lori would say, if you got a broken leg or we're in a car accident, and I've been on enough fire calls to know that, thank God there's ambulances to take people to trauma units to get broken legs set. Because, I had a friend who, oh God, years ago, probably 25 years ago, he got run over by, his foot did, by somebody trying to rip him off. And he come to my house and his ankles all just broke into pieces. And I'm like, dude, you need to go to the hospital. He's like, I'm not going to the hospital. I don't need no hospital. And I'm like, but bro, seriously? And I don't know if it was this faith-based thing, God's going to fix it, but there's sort of a purpose for ERs, but now would I go to a doctor for something like, and again, even like a gallbladder or a ruptured spleen or something, that can be beneficial. But there's also, would you go to a doctor just because you're having emotional things? Perhaps a psychiatrist isn't the best thing to do, because they're just going to put you on the regimen of drugs, and then you're going to develop a stomach issue and need a drug for that. And next thing you know, and I've known people like this too, they're on 26 to 30 medications, and then their health really starts to spiral. So I think it all has a place. You just got to have discernment. And that's my word of the year every year since 2013, develop your discernment, but be practical. You can't, I'm not a faith healer. I think that having, the awareness of the spirit within you, which powers your healing, is good. But man, if you need an ER doctor, by God, go get your legs set, because faith isn't going to heal you. It's like the example of the guys in the flood and his family's on the roof and it's flooded. The Coast Guard comes by, goes, you need a lift to the land? No, God's going to save me. So 2 more boats come by. He tells them the same thing, and then he drowns. He goes to heaven. He's like, God, why didn't you save me? He said, I sent 3 boats. Don't be that guy, right?
Don't be that guy. Exactly. Well, that's the thing. Back to the masculine, feminine. So, in the last few years, saw how that exists at many levels of nature. For example, the predator and the prey, and then in our human ecosystem, you got the public and the private. And they're not equal, they're not balanced, but there is a balanced way that they can exist the same way. When there's a healthy balance of predator and prey, that doesn't mean there's equal numbers of them. That means that it works for that environment. Correct. Then, and I always say this, but when you take the predators out of the environment, then the prey become the predator on the land. So there's something inherent in that polarization. And what was I going to say about that? Darn, don't remember. But they're something that, oh yeah. So like when we demonize the doctor, and I've been there big time, like so big time. I was, I got so sick because I was trying to avoid, well, one of the reasons anyway, I tried to avoid doctors and the whole chemotherapy and radiation and all that kind of thing. I just was trying to, and then it rebounded me. So I ended up doing gobs of chemotherapy, gobs and gobs of it. It was almost like that was the balance for me to have such huge resistance to it. It called it in. Same thing, like when you're resisting death, then all of a sudden you start getting the signs that death is coming for you. And so the worst thing you can do is to demonize the public. You're going to demonize the police. You're going to demonize the government, the public medical system, and all of those things. If you don't humble yourself to it, then you're going to be the one with the broken leg that never healed because God didn't show up with anything but the ambulance and the boat and
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't cut that. And knowing that that's the masculine archetype that's hardwired right here. As you beat on that system, you are beating on yourself, beating yourself down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I demonized the Wasp's Kingdom back in 2005, and I was stung repeatedly over and over. In fact, I declared war on them. I said, Lori, I'm going to get some spray. I'm going to blast them. And then they built a nest right inside the door. And I'm like, I can't even go out on the deck because they're waiting for me. And she's walking in and out. She's like, if you didn't create a war with them, they would probably not be so anxious to sting you. And it was really my own fear. And I'm putting out this frequency, or this, whatever you want to call it, this thought form of fear that, I needed to fight basically for my survival if I'm going to live in the same zone as these wasps are. And she told me she should sit with this and look at it. So I did. And one day I think I said something like, you know what? I just got stung again. I'm walking out the door, and I wasn't even paying attention. I just walked out the door because we'd barbecue a lot, and I'd go out on the deck or go out to have a sit and a beer or whatever. And so I get stung. I'm just like, hon, I just walked out. And she's like, well, you did. And I said something like, all right, prove to me that you're not afraid of these wasps. And there just so happens there's a little wasp, actually not a little one, but a big red mama. I mean, it had to be as big as, a silver dollar, right? And she walks right up to it. It's on the floor. She puts her hand down on the floor. The wasp crawls onto her hand. She opens the door, holds her hand out, and the wasp flies away. And I'm just like, I'm like, all right, so you're doing since you did that, now you're calling me out. And a couple days went by, and I'm like, there's a wasp right on the kitchen counter. And I got the guts up, and I'm like, okay, no fear. I'm going to do this. And so I put my hand out. Big old red mama, she crawled right up on my hand. I go to the door, open the door. She flies away. So when I ended my war against the wasps, I quit getting stung. And you look at people and they have these bees, they're completely covering their entire body. What is it that allows them not to get stung? And the only thing I could come up with is they don't have the fear of it. And what we fear about the natural world or the public or even the private will come for us, because it's God's reciprocal universe going, I want balance. My children, balance. And that means balance between your own hemispheres. Between fear and courage is the stillness. And if you can get between the need for courage and between the reaction of fear, then you've responded well. And you're now in a state of treatment versus illness,
Nice.
And so
nice.
I think, again, there's standing between the tension of opposites. You're between the private and the public, but you can use either one as needed.
And that's when you can use either one.
Exactly.
When you're not polarized, when you're not saying private good, public bad, or the other way around. Yeah.
And that's being an alchemist. That's being a modern day alchemist, and same with Israel or Palestine. Everybody that got polarized is at an eternal war with each other.
Yeah.
Is not that divide and conquer? I mean, it's not so much, again, it's nuance too, but yeah, I think you hit it. And if that's what you're teaching the right thing, because wholeness is the greatest power there is.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
So yeah, a couple of things inside there, we're going real deep here, is that when you said how you are, basically pulling that experience into you with the fear that you're, as soon as you didn't have that fear, then you were free from getting the bites. And so, how does this see from God's perspective that you have two basic forces? One is like an attachment, which we're often much more aware of, and then an aversion, which we're tend to be more unconscious to, but they're actually the same action. And I'm wondering if that actually is what you're talking about with the reciprocal nature of the universe. How, because say people, if we just use an example of a goal, like, well, I'll always use something really, really trite, like I want a new car. And you don't have the new car. So there's two, I always tell people when they're working on a goal, it's usually not about a car. I had a goal as a car, but there's two reasons you don't have the thing that you want yet. It's because you're both attached to it and you have an aversion to it. And people are like, oh no, no, there's no reason I don't want this. I really want this, but that's more in the unconscious. So does that fit with any of the studies that you've come across?
Well, this harkens to the Secret movie, sort of kind of the secret idea that if you just hold it in your mind, you'll attract it. But what it fails to deliver is that, hoping for something, and this is just me trying to ad lib onto this, but if you're hoping for something, you're not working hard enough to get it. The universe it's an action universe. It's as much a mind universe as it is an action universe. The Russells term it a mind wave universe. Our minds are stillness, but when they begin to think, they start waving. And when they wave, your body follows those waves in order to complete what we hold as an idea into a representative body. You want that new truck, it's beautiful, or that house, or insert object A. It could be anything, right? It could even be a rock garden. But if you don't drive to the river to get the rock, load it into the bed of your pickup, and then bring it back to your house, put it in a wheelbarrow, wheel it up the hill into your backyard, get the shovel out and start digging to place each of these large flat stones to create your patio or whatever it is. If you don't work to raise the money to make the payments for the vehicle, it's never going to appear. It's never going to be there. So I think we can think inwardly and we can live in an imaginative universe, but if we don't work toward the external, then it's just wishful thinking. And if we're always too external, then we're just living for the senses. So again, between hedonism and idealism, or materialism and idealism, is a fine balance. The body does have a purpose. The body is here to manifest our creative thoughts. And so many of the great religions will even, their number one tenet, what is our purpose? The question answered is to manifest our creator, which we're part of the creative force or the creator itself. So what we manifest as a creator or create as a creator is our purpose, whatever that is. And finding that purpose allows you to live a purposeful life.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. Yeah, that law of attraction. We probably don't need to spend any more time on it, but I can see. And interestingly, that was a student of Lester Levinson, who is the one who found that version of the scale of emotion, scale of action, he called it, by the way.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. And we're talking about the masculine and feminine ongoing here, so I have a feeling that's going to come up here around the sun and the moon. And I know you have a unique take on that. I'm always interested. When I discovered for myself that I couldn't understand the globe anymore, it didn't make sense to me. My world had never made sense to me before. Now it does with the contemplation of the possibility that we're in this realm. And so, how do you see the sun and the moon? And is there a masculine, feminine side to them?
I see them as doubly charged. The sun, I'm convinced myself that carbon is the center of the octave. It's really the only element, if you will. And every element prior to carbon is trying to become carbon. Every element beyond carbon is carbon dying. And the way you know that is the 666 of their model is 6 protons, 6 electrons, 6 neutrons, which is, again, the balance, right? But yet, why did they pick these numbers, and why do they believe in these studded, particle ideas that everything's particles? And what is a neutron anyways? A particle without a charge? I mean, give me a break. Why don't you just say block wall or point of reversal? Do I hit a neutron when I breathe in and I stop and I have to reverse in the other direction? Have I just run into a bunch of neutrons? Or is that simply the boundary of a wave field? And your wave of inhalation must meet the cube wave field boundary and reverse in the opposite direction toward exhalation. Our very own breath tells us the secret nature of the universe, and Walter Russell's cubic wave field model lines up beautifully with that, because he posits an inhalation and exhalation universe, a universe of in-breathing, out-breathing, a universe of syntropy, which is inhalation, and entropy, which is exhalation, or charging and discharging, or compression and expansion. All of these are terms Russell used to describe what moves on the stillness. But the stillness manages and bounds all of these seemingly dualistic motions. And it lined up perfectly with alchemy for me. I'm like, man, that's the center of the alchemical drawings, to balance the sun and moon in each and the other. And as for, the sun and moon are, in many teachings, especially Hermeticism, opposites and things like that. But as to what they are, until I find a better model that actually gives me an explanation rather than just some plasmoid that you can't make sense of. I have a cousin in California, and he's an amateur photographer, and I've seen his photos. Jupiter looks like Jupiter, just like the photos and he's an amateur. He's not involved with NASA. Sorry, everybody. It's not just some blob of plasma that has no contour, no relative shape. And there's other reasons that I would say that, until a better model comes along, that for me, the Russell model works great because it's directly in confliction with NASA and with current math. We don't need math to explain the universe. Math has landed us in this higher dimensional conundrum of absurdity, which the New Age movement latches onto, the whole quantum community, which a quanta has no existence. There's no such thing as a quantum particle in nature. And so to me, the Russell science is the missing link, or the you could even call it the fulcrum between flat and spherical Earth. How about the third option? I hear nobody talking about gravity existing from a Russell standpoint, or that space is filled with, that it's not a vacuum, but rather filled with 3 fully toned octaves of matter called the space gases, which are lighter than hydrogen, which science falsely calls isotopes. Do the research, folks. You can convince me of this and that, but look into the Russell model, apply that to your idea, and then get back to me, because I have put the work into it 15 years now. And I'll tell you what I've seen in the lab, what I've seen demonstrated on the bench over and over, what I know about magnets that most people will never know. It's incredible. And there's absolutely something to all of this. And anybody can find out about this stuff. Just pick up a Russell book and read The Secret of Light. If you're more scientific minded, read A New Concept of the Universe, and you'll really start to see that there's a third option here. And I don't like religions. I don't like people saying, you need to join my camp or you're one of them. I'm not one of anybody. One of these kids is doing his own thing, and he doesn't need to be flat or round necessarily and champion one or the other. He can stand between the tension of opposites and have his own mind. So
nice. I love that. And you reminded me that you have an offer for people to get 20% off books from the Walter and Leo Russell at philosophy.org.store. And this code GROW20 will get you 20% off the books. So if you haven't dove in with those, then this is a good time to do that. And so
I've never met a person yet who wasn't happy that they got a Russell book.
Yeah, fair enough. I need to start my library. What would be a good first one?
Well, you pick it, and I'll pay for it and send it to you free of
Oh, wow.
charge.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Aw, thank you very much.
And that'll be a happy spring gift from me
Aw,
to you.
very nice. Oh, hey, Miguel. Nice to see you. Good early evening. Yeah, so let's see if there's anything that I've got more on my list here. Like, for example, the God particle. I saw a book next door about the God particle, and I opened it up, and I probably read I had less than 3 pages, and I instantly got disillusioned by it because it seemed like they were very much trying to usurp this God element. I know God is even a bad word. When you talk to Mark Archie, he's like, no, it's not what you think it is in terms of even our name of that. So what is the God particle to you? Because I've heard you speak it in a much more enlightened way. So,
Yeah, that's simple. Carbon is the God particle. It's
okay.
got the highest melting point. It's the hardest substance. The crystal of carbon is the diamond. It's the complete balance between male and female. It's the most plentiful element in the universe, with over 10 million known chemical bonds, and they're discovering tens of thousands every year more. Carbon steel would be the strongest steel. There's just so many things about carbon, and it's funny that they have a war on carbon,
Right.
right? And they want to tax us for being human, which is a carbon life form. Carbon-based life forms are the manifestation of the creator's thinking. It's what we call physicality. And to me, I look at the sun and I see a burning ball of carbon. And why is it carbon? Well, that's the amplitude of the wave. The carbon light bulbs that they created they just kept burning. They never burned out. They literally hundreds of years a carbon light bulb would burn if the filament was carbon. Why did they go to tungsten? Because tungsten is in the death half of the wave. At carbon, you start going back toward death when you go beyond it. From hydrogen up to carbon, which is also, you should look at the Russell spiral chart of the elements, which is an actual representation of the wave of creation. Much more definitive, much more explanatory than the Mendeleev chart, which is incomplete and two-dimensional. So the Russell chart of the elements is imperative. Grab a poster at philosophy.org. They're incredible. And you'll see how at the 4.5 octave of 9 octaves, which is 81 keys on a piano, interestingly enough, the Russell model is cubic in its math, it's tonal in and it's also based on the spectrum, the color spectrum as well, which all fits very neatly into this. It's a seamless cosmology, which is what's beautiful about it. And it's as if an artist or a poet was the one to give the science to man that as a two-way motion universe would free him from his one-way delusion of a heat, death, dying, exploding Big Bang universe presented by a Jesuit Catholic priest in 1931, just 5 years after Walter presented his two-way motion universe to the world of science, and they rejected it. It seems to me, in fact, the Vatican contacted Walter and said the Pope would issue a decree against the Universal One book if he reprinted it. And that's an interesting caveat. And just 5 years later, they present this one-way dying universe model, which is still the main model today. Again, we're in a battle of models here. And until you show a better model, you're just blowing hot air. Somebody's got to do the work and make the supporting claims with evidence to change any model. Buckminster Fuller said, don't go to war with it, present a new one that makes the old one obsolete. So really the challenge is open to everybody. And the more people that get into the mix and try to figure out, for instance, what we live on, or what is carbon, or what is this, or what is that, the better. But carbon is the God particle. There's no doubt in my mind. And that's why they're at war with it, because they want to invert it, make it bad, make it evil, make it verboten. And yet it's the perfect balance of male and female, and the very diamond, which is its crystal, is what unites male and female in the ceremony of marriage. Yet we're taught to think that that's evil too. So we'll see.
There you go. I love that. That's way better than the crap I was reading in the book.
Right.
Yeah, very good. So you said also, I heard you talk about non, say non-vibration, and if I got this correct, being full of life, and then vibration itself being full of death. I think I've got a question mark. I think I'm wondering if that's where you were headed with that. Do you recall even the context you were saying that in, or can you respond to that?
Well, the life force is there could be two definitions for life, and Mark Archer would probably agree with this, that life is God, more or less. It's the invisible white light that, from a Russell perspective, again, we're tying something to the Bible, and I appreciate Mark's insights. I understand the Bible from that perspective too, but I also have the Russell knowledge underneath, and it's really, as a decoder pen, a secret decoder pen, the Russell cosmology is that decoder. It was a Rosetta Stone for me to be able to know what Krishna meant when he said this, or to know what Jesus meant when he said that, or to know what William Blake meant when he said this, or Jacob Bohm when he said this, or the Buddha. There's all these different teachings, but yet I couldn't decipher. I thought they were all separate. But what I learned from the Russells is that all illuminates speak the same language, only the words vary. And in my study in mysticism, the beauty of that is you start to be able to translate between one tradition and another, and you start to pull out the truths, or the golden thread that weaves these truths all together. And it really broadens your perspective. It means that, perhaps the Christians aren't so much different than this group or that group, or, they certainly practice things in their own way and see things in their own way, but the words they use are saying the same thing that William Blake was saying about this, or that William Shakespeare, for God's sakes, in some of his sonnets were so highly mystical, but yet the mystics, they all have this reverence for telling you about this particular experience of the light, and the incredible inspiration that brings these incredible words into the works of their books and their artworks and things of this nature. Incredibly inspired art is, when you're inspired, you're in the spirit. You're literally in the heart of the spiral, which is what the word inspirited means. But
Wow.
to be in that spirit, the stillness of the one, and to bring that idea forth and then divide it with your two hands, right? If we had one hand, it'd be undivided, but we have two, right? So we have to divide the stillness into two, or the motion or the silence into two. And that's what you can't have a one beat rhythm. The first rhythm in music is 1 2 1 2, right? And just like you can't have a heartbeat that's singular, there's always a bump bump, a bump bump.
Yeah, that won't. Single beat of a heart doesn't make life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but again, what we term darkness isn't the resound or the echo of the heart. It's not the. It's so funny we call it echocardiogram. It's not the darkness, which is anti-God. That's the reflection of it, and that's why the idea that we're moving forward, we can't see the reflection. We can't see its repetition. That's not visible to our senses. So we just simply claim it doesn't exist. But basically, life gives to life so life can live, and life gives to death. I'm sorry, death gives to life so life can live, and life gives to death so death can die. But each of these make one as to a process. And those two plus the one are three, which is really, when you begin to see alchemically into the universe, the whole of the universe becomes a triality. It's that which we truly exist in, as opposed to simply a duality. Because what is noticing the dual, if not you, the one, noticing the two, which is three, right?
Right. I was going to ask you about witness consciousness, or, the witness, how doesn't matter what you're witnessing, you are the witness. And that's the Trinity element? What
Mhm.
makes the three? Yeah, yeah, beautiful. That's great. I've also heard you say that the higher vibration, the more dangerous the vibration.
Right.
Can you speak about that as well?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things too I learned about from the Russell teachings. The home study course in particular was life changing, and that's where their quote, "There are no vibrations to the spirit whatsoever," and it caused me much because I still believed back at that time that, oh, I can raise my vibration. I'm going to be a badass, right? I'm going to be able to do all this cool stuff, and I'll be able to get out of here, and I can go into the higher dimension, you know. And then I read that and I'm like, oh shit. Okay, what are they talking about? And I had to sit with that for a long time. And then it started to make sense. And I was recording one day and I noticed the flat line going across my Pro Tools. And then I'd hit the piano key, ding, and it would register a wave. And then it's back to flat. And I thought, okay, so let's make a really high vibration here. And I started slamming the keyboard, and then it was just junk, but high vibrational junk. And then I thought, okay, wait a second here. Why am I trying to raise my vibration when all the mystical writings I'm reading talk about stillness, going back to stillness to get closer to God? Be still and know that I am God. It doesn't say do jumping jacks, make yourself vibrate at the speed of light to know I am God. Where have I read that? A bunch of New Age teachings? Maybe the what's the name of the thing? The Kabbalion talks about this God as a very high vibrating thing, but that's written by people that didn't even sign their name. You know, 3 initiates. You mean 3 Freemasons initiates, right? So I'm going to believe them. They took some very core teachings and which are hermetic of their own nature, but it's what they mix in that you got to be real careful of. So then I looked at an earthquake. I'm like, okay, I'm looking at I type in earthquake videos, and here's a liquor store, and I'm like, okay, I like to drink, so I'm going to watch this video about an earthquake in a liquor store. Now, before the earthquake, everything's perfect, right? All the bottles are nicely on the shelf. Then this earthquake comes along and all the shit falls onto the floor and breaks. Well, there's a high vibration. Everything's breaking. And then I'm like, wait a second, a fever's a high vibration. When you're feeling your worst and you're running a fever and you're sweating and you feel like shit, that's a high vibration. That's your body going into hyperspeed to rid yourself of whatever the infection is or the imbalance. You know, it's body's in a defense mode. And then I think of, okay, let's look at the light spectrum of high frequency. So high frequency light, ultraviolet. Has anybody here, raise your hand, ever had a sunburn? Okay, is that something you want to aspire to? So it was at that point I had to say, you know, this whole high vibration stuff, and in my Knowing the Creator 101 series, the second episode, I really lay out the fallacy and the need to question this new age gobbledygook about raising our vibrations. Nothing could be further from the truth. What I've discovered through my 20 plus years of research is that the lower your vibration, and from a mental clarity standpoint, the more power you can access. And it's directly proportional to the stillness of your mind between the opposites, that you can command those opposites to fulfill your own divine thoughts.
Beautiful. I love that. And I'm reminded of whales, how they have extremely low frequency sound, and it causes troughs on the ocean floor that can go for miles and miles and miles and miles, right? And reach the right message of protection or connection. And then you think about, say, our, should we say it, Senko Hay? I'll do it Jeff Berwick style. The towers that have now, is it low frequency, high frequency? It's very short wave, so that would make it high frequency, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, and they're the most
Low frequencies, yeah, ultra low sound versus.
right, and they're the most dangerous thing of all, but they don't go far, is one advantage, right? So I've got one across the street. I don't think it reaches me.
Is this you say 5G?
Yeah. Sorry, I was
Yeah.
trying to go in code there, but
Oh, yeah. Well, the Cinco G, if
hey,
that works. Um, you have three kinds of it. There's low, and then mid grade and high, ultra high, or low, high, and ultra. But the higher the frequency, the faster the waves, the shorter the waves. And as we know, ultraviolet is a very high frequency light wave, and that's why it burns. You light uranium on fire, and the reason there's 91 electrons given off with uranium or 92 with plutonium is because the core is unwinding so fast. In Russell's science and the chart of the elements, carbon is a closed hole element. It's at the center of the wave. So the center of the 9 octaves, 4.5 is the carbon, and that's the closed hole. That's the fusion particle, the single fusion particle. Balanced male, female, which is why it's the God particle. It's the union of opposites. It is the vesica. The child within the vesica Pisces is the carbon atom. And from a chemistry standpoint, everything that is before carbon has an open hole at its nucleus, and everything beyond carbon has an open hole. Now, on the way up to carbon, the hole is closing, getting smaller and smaller. You get to carbon, it's fusion, it's closed, completely solid, and then it starts to open up and get bigger and bigger, and you start throwing off more electrons as you get further away from carbon. So the center, everything coming up from the first octave to carbon is closing and charging. Everything going beyond carbon is opening and discharging. So you could say with our own age cycle, from 0 to 40, a baby is charging into a fully grown adult, a mature adult, which is also why Russell said great men and women come alive at 40. That's when life really begins. Because at 40, you're already into the death half of the wave, moving it back toward the refoldment of your incarnation. But it's in that richness of those later years where the wisdom, where the ability to express, where the ability to attain, to create really takes the fire and puts it into your, that's when you should have mastered or begin mastering your life. And so much we think of life as something we need to achieve this or that, but by a certain age, right? If I don't get this by the time I'm 30, or young men like myself when I was young, back in my teens, late teens, early 20s, used to say, I'm never going to live past 30. I'll be lucky to make it past 33. But then you get past it and you start to realize that was all sort of horse shit. And when you get older, you start to gain a little bit of the wisdom, and wisdom is really, to define it correctly, I would say it's the ability to use knowledge. A man can have all the knowledge in the universe, but without wisdom, he can't use it. So when you acquire certain knowing and then you start using it correctly, your life unfolds. But so basically, the elemental stage of carbon getting to maturity and then eventually dying by throwing off rings. What do our humans' bodies do when we get older? We start getting rings under the eyes, rings on the forehead, lines on the, we start aging. Our bones start to throw off. The interior of the bones become hollow, much like the planets. That's why Saturn would have so many rings, because it's older, being born from the sun. Everything is born from a primary. And so the young planets have no rings, they have no moons, but the older ones have many moons, and many rings because they're older, right? So if you look at the creation from such a standpoint, it really becomes a seamless cosmology. And that's what Walter presented to the world. That's what he tried in so many ways and so hard throughout his whole life, Leo included, to give that seamless cosmology to man, which is, again, two-way. It's life and death, not just a death universe, which is going to die and consigns the creator to a death sentence. It's and that can be applied, any of these questions can be answered when you understand that all things in the universe follow the same law. There's not one set of law for large things and a completely different set for smaller ones. It's it's one law for all, and all things follow it.
That's amazing. I'm loving this so much. Maybe with the time that we have left, if you still are game, there's some good questions coming out. We can get deep questions from Miguel Connor here.
Sure.
Yeah, can you ask if your opinion on experiments, the double slit in physics, and Masaru Emoto's water experiments, also the random number generator flip coin experiment from the 60s or 70s?
Oh, wow. Good ones.
It's a lot, yeah? Right on.
Yeah, double slit is interesting. Basically, they're firing electrons through a slit, and the electrons are, according to them, doing what they do something different because they're watching it, and when they don't watch it, it does something different. I don't know that I'm definitely the one to ask this question to. We had a gentleman that used to work for the University of Science and Philosophy, Darren Colomb, that could answer this in 10 seconds flat. But let's just say that light waves are not particles, and all light bends. Even lasers will bend because there's no straight lines in nature. There's all motion is spiral, and all direction is curved, as Walter would say. So yeah, the act of observation collapses the wave field, and that's the eye. Again, the eye is a sphere, right? It's got lenses, and if you didn't have curvature in your lenses, you couldn't see through a microscope. If you didn't have curvature in your telescope, you couldn't see through it. It's the act of curvature itself, which is what allows observation. Now, part two,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He says, Dr. Masaru Emoto, I read his book, wonderful. It's beautiful. I mean, yeah, you can imbue matter with what we would call negative or malfeasant, speech to, how do you feel getting cussed out? We've all been cussed out by somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some guy at the light, you cut him off accidentally. You son of a, it doesn't feel good. It's the water, right? We're taking that in, and it sort of manifests or creates a feeling in us, right? Or you do something dumb and your mate calls you out on it, or whatever. It's, even we've all felt it, is the point. But then you feel something good too. You feel happy. You see something like an extremely beautiful sunset, or someone gives you a compliment and your day is made. It turns everything around. So yeah, the water experiments were how much? 78% water, our human bodies.
At least.
So there it is. That's absolutely, the guy was amazing to do the work he did. And there's much to do on that whole thing yet. And I think we can find what our diseases are. The Josh and Adam Bickelson, and the holographic nature of the blood is what? Liquid. So it's made of mostly water. So if we can look more into stuff like that, there's all kinds of stuff. The random number generator flip coin experiment.
Could I jump in real quick?
Sure.
To add to that is that the programming exists in something of a water state. And it, you start off with emotions being more of a water element, but there are definitely times where the release process feels like I'm letting plasma go in waves or like bloops or something that is kind of indescribable, but it is the water that contains the experience that is being generated. Yeah. So yes, I just had to add that. Go ahead.
Water has memory. You nailed it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So do we actually remember things in our brain, or do we remember things in our blood?
Or both? Is it the water in the brain that is the seeds, the cerebellum, cerebrum, and the seed that has the memory, this small little germ that knows it's going to be the oak tree somehow?
Yeah, because without water, there'd be no division in the seed. So all great questions to ask.
Yeah. Very sublime. And you want to take on the number 3, the random number generator flip coin experiment? in the 60s or 70s.
Yeah, I have to say I bode ignorance on this one because I haven't really looked at it. I do know about random number generator on 9/11 that they all coincided in the 37 sites around the world during that attack. They all seemed to spit out the same for a brief period of time, but that's about the most study that I've really put into it. So I'm sort of uninformed on what is the current state of random number generators, but are they affected by consciousness? If you look at the ironic similarities on 9/11 with these random generators, perhaps they do. There's something more to that as well. I must revisit it, I think.
Right. Well, maybe I'll also have to have Miguel on to talk about it. The flip coin experiment is about the effect our intent has on luck. So that's very interesting. And then he's
There you
added
go.
one more thing. It directly affects the flip rate based off intention, yes, directly affected by consciousness.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Fun. Great minds are collaborating here. I
There
love
you
it.
go.
I
Yeah,
love it.
for sure.
Yeah, if there's any other questions, I know I've missed some of the chat. I apologize. I had to pay all my attention on this one, just to be part of this conversation. Thank you for contributing over on Rockfin. That's awesome. Let's see. So many of us have pain while going through the transition process, but for all we know, the pupil stage for a butterfly is a painful transition. Talking about death back in that death conversation that we had. Yeah. Interloping is defined as unwanted or unwelcome involvement. And then, I was just entertaining that interloping may be neutral and that it's what do we do with it? Do we use it for escapist purposes or do we use it for creatist purposes? For example, in terms of expressing the heart and mind of God. Nature does create straight lines. I know I always want to say that, Daniel, too, because it's not chemtrails, let's say.
Well, actually, the greatest scientific evidence for a straight line in nature is in the cleavage of crystals.
Right.
But beyond that, if a crystal was large enough over a large enough area, it would eventually curve. Is the sentiment there?
Okay.
But again, it's size and scale. We're looking at crystals that fit in the palm of our hand, but to this date, basically nature has a certain flow that she follows. To say that water flows in a straight line would be just as unnatural as to say, we see in a straight line, for instance. Because we have curvature in our lenses of our own eyes, and our eyes are spheres. So it's interesting to me that the debate rages on, as to curvature, but yet what are we seeing through a curved lens? So think about it, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, I'm going to look at that all different now. That's so great. Is there anything else that you felt like it's burning inside of you that you want to talk about?
Well, I think our trip to Anarchapulco was one that I'll say it was a great learning experience for me, especially the chance to network with folks like yourself and just meeting like Yerasimos from Here for the Truth and Alex Zek and Curtis Stone,
Andy Kaufman,
Sam, and just there's so many folks, just great folks to have met.
Steve Falconer.
Steve Falconer, my God, what that guy is so funny. I mean, we laughed so hard, him and I, and we weren't even drinking. That's the funny part.
That's great.
Him and also Max Sloan, just such great people to be able to sit and talk with. Ian Smith and some real heroic people who have gone through incredible hardships. And to me, it's like that just shows me one thing, that people can overcome. We were all seemingly there to just share, like, hey, we all have hardships, right? But all of us, can overcome our hardships, and we all want to share that overcoming with our audiences, not so that we can be, worshipped or adored or even held up on a high pinnacle, but just to share the fact that it's possible. And I often like to say this, I long for the days when none of these truth movements or podcasts will be necessary anymore, because that means everybody gets it. And we're all living our lives creating incredible things for the future exploration of new areas in reality, you could say. We all have the incredibleness within us to create and think original thoughts and live authentic lives. And it's sort of what I brought home from Mexico, was that so many people I met are doing that very thing exactly. And yeah, Pamela says, I'm ready. She said earlier on the Rumble chat, it feels like we are each an idea in the mind of God. We absolutely are. Just like every drop is inside the mind of the ocean. We are all unique, yet we all stem from and return to the same source, as a seed does. The roots and the fruits all stem from the same seed, and that seed is inside that seed. You can look in the acorn, and nowhere will you find 100-foot tall, 50-ton oak tree, but it is there nonetheless. And it just has to unfold into its true nature, which is the image of what is unseen. And that's what we are. We are as much the seen as we are the unseen, and we are becoming and unbecoming that image in every moment that we live and breathe.
Boom. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Matt. I hope this is our first of many conversations to come in the future. I really, really enjoyed looking into your work. I know I'll spend a lot more time with it. And yes, Miguel, let's schedule for that conversation. That would be so fun. Yeah, it's been a total pleasure. I loved meeting you in person. There is something different. I always try to say, oh no, it's I've worked with people day in, day out to great results on Zoom, on phone, so connection isn't limited by that, but there is something that happens when you are face to face, and you can, tactically have your hand in their, on them or in their energy. And, so yes, I hope I meet you again at Anarchapulco at least next year. That was your first trip out. So that's fantastic. Yeah. Good first destination. Well done.
For sure. First international trip. And it was a learning experience in itself, traveling into a country. It did give me a sense of how wonderful my life is here at home too, to be able to experience, another country and its values, and just gives you a adoration and appreciation for the good things. And we all want good things in our lives. And I think that's one of the glorious things about human nature is, there's a striving for that happiness, that pursuit of it, which is enshrined in, like the documents of the United States, for instance, founding documents, but it's in every human heart, really. And I think, not every single one, but it's there, maybe ignored by some, but it's there for those who want it. It's there, and it's accessible 100%.
Very nice. Well, thank you once again for joining me. Just letting people know that on Monday, I'm hosting Anna Reitzert. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's the author of 2 books. This is Krivda, the God Tricks Against the Matrix. And we're actually going to be talking about her second book on Birdie Blue and the radical gentleness, undoing kind of thing. The whole book is about not doing. It's really, funny. She's amazing. We have really good conversations. And then Thursday will be Mark Archer again, or not again, but thanks to you, I connected with him, and I thought I was done trying to explain the Bible, and I am, but that conversation that you had with him really drew me in again. Like maybe things are more understandable than they appear to be.
Yeah, so he's done some great work, and it's about time somebody decodes it from an angle that, is going to help a lot more people understand it. But all good stuff. And thank you again, Beth. It's been a real pleasure to join you today, and I really appreciate it.
I'm so glad. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Have a great rest of your day. And I'll just make a couple of more, I'll just invite people that actually a lot of people have been signing up for my archetype assessment. And I know it can seem like a personality quiz, but it's really not, in the respect that the purpose of it is not just so you feel like, oh yeah, I know who I am now. Because it's not just who you are, it's where you are and how you fit in the context of the hero's journey that becomes, it is a little seed. In 10 minutes or less, you can find out where you are on the path of purpose based on some questions. It's incredibly reliable. You can do it over time. If you've done it before, then you can go and do it again and see potentially how are you evolving on that hero's journey to be full of purpose and full of service at the same time. So you can do that. And I'm actually creating a course right now. I was real thinking of you because when that creative energy bubbled up for me in the last few months, I kept saying like, nah, it's going to get me out of balance. I know that every time I do something new, it's like chaos and I eat out for 6 weeks or whatever. And I was sitting there and I was just letting go of all my tension and my resistance. And I realized like, I have a good friend that could do a bunch of the back end work for me and I could just create. So she immediately accepted the invitation and the course came spilling out of me. It was all there, like I'd been threatening to do it for a long time as well. This is particularly on the nurturer archetype for those who like to help and support others. And they are the one that always shows up and, doesn't let people down, but sometimes and oftentimes they crash. So I'm going to be offering a free mini version of the course that's about the pendulum swing from helping everyone to helping no one, helping everyone, helping no one, because you crash and you hate everyone after you help them and even sometimes while you help them. So just to let everybody know that's coming up, getting pretty excited about it. And there will be a free sign up for the event that comes in advance of the actual course. So that's all my announcements for today. We'll see you guys back on Monday. Super looking forward to talking to Anna again. She's deep as well, deep like Matt is. And once again, thank you everyone in the chat for coming. Please do share this out. The shadow banning is really stupid. Yeah, I get off these and I look at Facebook on YouTube. It says 7 views, and there were more than 7 people here. Like they're literally cutting views and cutting comments. If you don't hear back from me about comments, it's not because I'm ignoring you. I actually really love responding to them. So don't hesitate. Come to my website. That's always the cure, is to stay in contact by email so that if the media fails us, then we have something to fall back on.
And remember, the creative process reverses aging.
Creative process reverses aging. It gives you something to love for. My grandma, who lived to 96, is a pure example of that. She never stopped creating, and she had a long, good life for it. Yeah. And so will you. Yeah. Come on Telegram, by the way. I just joined Matt's channel. That's a deep conversation going on over there. And I'll maybe drop that link in the show notes below.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Beth.
Okay, you're very welcome. Bye for now.
See you.